actually really liked this next book for the majority of it, but when it got to the end, it just completely shit the bed. Here's Glow.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
So this book was really, really weird for me because when I first saw it, I was a bit apprehensive about reading it because it had a pretty nice idea for a plot, I thought. You know, that looked really neat. But in the summary, it felt the need to mention both the romance and the love triangle. And as a general rule, if a book mentions a love triangle in the summary, I just don't want to read it. It sounds shitty. Because, let's be honest, most love triangles are shitty. But I was pleasantly surprised by this one. It was pretty much all plot focused with very little teenage romance or drama getting in the way. And what drama was there was actually quite good. For most of this book, I was actually thinking, wow, this is a pleasant surprise. This is pretty good. I would definitely recommend this to people. But then it gets to the last 30 pages, and everything just falls apart. I mean, the plot it was telling falls apart, whatever message it was trying to send, it just completely breaks itself into pieces. And so for that reason, I don't really know what to say about this book. So this is going to be difficult to talk about without spoilers, so I'm going to do a really quick spoiler-free summary and review, and then I'm just going to move on to the spoiler part. So this book is about a bunch of people on a generation ship which has left Earth like 45 years earlier, and it still has another like 45 or 50 years till it reaches its destination, and when they get there, they're going to colonize a new planet and start a new life. And there's actually two ships there. There's the one that the main characters live on, called the Empyrean, and that's home to two teenagers named Kieran and Waverly, who, get this, they're in love. And one day, the other generational ship that was sent out ahead of them, called the New Horizon, just shows up near them and boards their ship, kills a bunch of them, and kidnaps a bunch of the young girls, including Waverly, because apparently all the women on the New Horizon are infertile and they need people to breed with. And beyond that, I really don't want to say anything because the twisting and turning and fast nature of this plot is actually the best part of this book by a pretty huge margin. So just suffice to say, from that point on, it's actually really quite good. The things I liked about this were, like I said, the quick-paced plot. The way everything is written is very, very straightforward without a whole lot of purple prose and poetry getting in the way, so it's very easy to digest and very easy to get through. Waverly is actually a pretty decent main character as far as things go. Kieran isn't half bad either, but I do wish Waverly had gotten a lot more focus. And some of the themes in this are pretty alright. Like, there's a lot of religious criticism, and there's some talk about like gender roles and things like sexual assault as well, so it's kind of hardcore in that respect, but it's not really difficult to get through. My main problems with this were that, one, it didn't need to be part of a series. I think if they just made it about 40 or 50 pages longer and then tweaked a couple of things in the plot, I think this could have been a really good standalone book, but the trilogy is king, so whatever. And also, the ending to this one, even though it's a bit of a cliffhanger, it just sucks. Like, whatever themes it was trying to send, it throws out the window at the end, and so I can't really say I recommend it, but if that doesn't sound like it bothers you too much, then go ahead and try it. Okay, so now for the spoiler corner. So, near the beginning of this book, they mention that the Empyrean, the ship that Waverly and Kieran and them are on, was meant to be a ship made up of secular crewmen, whereas the New Horizons was made up of more religious people. And there are a couple of religious people on the Empyrean, but for the most part it doesn't really play a big role in their day-to-day life. Like, they don't even have a pastor or a priest or anything, so that's kind of interesting, you know, that, like, this book starts off by giving criticism on religion, and, oh yeah, I got my industrial-grade can opener ready to go. We're cracking open those worms. And while I did like the religious criticism at first, after a little bit it did start to feel a bit neckbeardy. Like, it wasn't saying anything about, like, actually how religion affects society, or how, you know, these aspects of it just don't make sense from a philosophical or from a scientific standpoint. but it was mostly just people sort of dismissing it. Like, oh yeah, I just don't care about it, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Which, on one hand, kind of makes sense, because a lot of the kids were just raised in a secular environment, and they hadn't really thought much about religion at all before that. So it makes sense that they just would dismiss it, you know, like, whatever. Which, because, let's be real for 1 second, like, if you weren't raised into a religion, then it just sounds kind of weird to you. Like, I was raised Christian, but I'm no longer Christian. But, so when I got older and I heard about things like Buddhism and Hinduism, they just sounded a little strange and weird to me. Whereas Christianity, for the longest time, just made sense. And if I imagine that the opposite could also be true if I had been raised as an atheist or something. Like, if I heard about any other religion when I got older, it would just sound weird and kind of dumb. So it makes sense that some of the characters would react that way. But then, at the end of the book, so I'm getting ahead of myself. I should summarize a little more. So when Waverly and the other girls go to the New Horizon, the religious ship, it's led by a pastor named Anne Mathers. And she's a complete dictator of everything. She uses her religion to manipulate people and yada, 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 yada. And at this point, I thought that it was, the religious criticism was a bit more intelligent, because it's showing, okay, yeah, sometimes people do use it to manipulate others and lie to them and things like that. So that was good, actually. I did enjoy that. After Waverly's misadventures there, she escapes. And that's really the least I want to say about it, because even in the spoiler review, there's still some really good parts that you should figure out, that you should see on your own. And then meanwhile, while all this is going on, most of the adults on the Empyrean are dead, and so it's really just Kieran and all the young boys that are stuck there. And Kieran's storyline is not nearly as good. It's just kinda... It's like Lord of the Flies combined with a mutiny tale of him trying to take control from some violent sociopath. You know, it's fine. I just wish it had gotten a lot less focus, because Waverly's tale is more interesting. But once Kieran goes through all his trouble and he manages to take control of everything, he figures he needs to give the other boys hope. So he starts becoming a pastor and preaching to them. But the main thing that makes this fall apart, because it could still tie into the criticism from before, where, you know, he's just using it to manipulate them, even if it is in a positive way, and he's, you know, lying to them and he's taking control. And that could still be very good if it weren't for just a couple of little paragraphs. Like I said, it's a secular ship, and most of the people there don't take religion very seriously. But he asks them, like, okay, how many of you believe in God? And almost all of them raise their hands. And then he goes, okay, how many of you went to church regularly? And only a couple raised their hands. And that's just... That's not how secularism or agnosticism or atheism works. Like, it's not that we believe in God, we just don't go to church. It's that we don't believe in religion. We don't believe in any sort of higher power or anything. And I'm not saying we're better for doing that, just so you know. I'm not going full fedora tipper here. I'm just saying that whatever criticism this book had for religion just sort of falls apart, because it doesn't seem to understand either side all that well, to be honest. Like, it sort of understands the religious side. Like, it says there's good people and bad people, sure, and it doesn't go into super deep detail, I should clarify. But the criticism there is good, whereas it just completely misunderstands the other side. And I don't know if the author that wrote this book is religious at all, but I'm willing to bet that she is. And so her misunderstanding of non-religious people just really couldn't be attributed to anything else, I don't think. So yeah, it's kind of a small thing when you really get down to it, but it's a big deal. It really is. Like, whatever criticism, whatever point this book was trying to make, it just sort of falls apart when you realize that it doesn't know what it's saying. And there's also one more little thing that sort of bothered me. So, the captain of the Empyrean is, he's killed when the New Horizons people board. And later, when Ann Mathers is talking to Waverly, she tells her a story about how the captain and a whole bunch of the men in the Empyrean crew are rapists, and how they used to gang rape other women before they left Earth. And, well, one, that's a little weird that all of these people are apparently still alive and still of childbearing age when they left the Earth 45 years ago. Like, and most of them weren't born on the ship. They're old enough to actually remember things, so you'd think they'd be like 60 by now. And also just the idea that most of the men in any sort of large group could be sexual predators, just that doesn't seem realistic at all to me. Like, I'm sorry, I give most men, I give most people way more credit than that. And hey, maybe I'm wrong, or maybe Anne was just lying to manipulate Waverly, or maybe people really could do that, but I just find it hard to believe. I'm sorry. And that's a shame, because really the plot of this book is good. It's fun to read, it's fast-paced, it's a good idea. Some of the main characters are fun, and some of the conversations are also good too, but there's just a couple of little things like that bother me. So yeah, overall, I just can't really bring myself to recommend this book. It's, you know, it's got some really good aspects to it, but it's, at the end of the day, it's just a little too clumsy for me, and I couldn't quite get into it. So, I'd say you have to skip this one.